The scythe is currently a whopping 1.8 bill right now, making TOB one of the best moneymakers in the game. In today's video, I'm going to lay out exactly what you need to do to maximize raids per hour. This video is going to have a lot of information. For that reason, I will be explaining topics concisely, leaving out smaller details that require lots of mental bandwidth for little return. This will ensure you actually learn something. Once you have a good grasp on everything in this video, you should expect roughly 16-minute raids. For those that want to take things to the next level, I will link resources further expanding on what I teach, allowing you to obsess over the details. Also, this video assumes a solid base understanding of TOB. I highly recommend you learn Max F trios first. I find them the most simple, and it's easier to get groups for them. That being said, the concepts overlap, so this video will still apply to all scales. Before we get into the raid itself, let's talk about inventories. These are not set in stone, but are widely used across the TOB community. As mage, I would drop your bottom switch in exchange for the light bearer. It will help you get spec for the 30 skip, as well as ensure claws for the red skip. This also makes your void switch easier for Nylo waves. You should be bringing both a scepter as well as a 15% damage staff such as the Kodai. You will need the scepter for stacking and skipping, and the Kodai will be used for freezing 50s and Nylos. If you have the shadow gem for your scepter, bring it. I will mention why later. As melee DPS, you should bring the maracas or sulfur blades until you are consistently getting good Nylo boss spawns. They are more consistent, user-friendly, and if you're watching this video, there's a decent chance you are taking your swift blade. Melee DPS also brings pot share, so make sure you have waters in addition to runes for spellbook swap, thralls, and death charge. Both range DPS and melee DPS want a ZCB. It's essential for Maiden and a faster Nylo boss. Range DPS has a pretty standard inventory. Make sure you're bringing the buckler and chins for Nylos. Let's move on to Maiden. Throughout the raid, thrall uptime should be near 100% and venges should always be taken off prayer if safe to do so. Try spellbook swapping between rooms to avoid downtime. In addition, Chali spec at the end of every boss. Each player starts Maiden with a pre-fire. Mage will use accurate, switch to rapid, and double Rollo spec. This entry causes your T-bow hit to register the same tick as the scythes, essential for good grab procs. Melee DPS will maul. If defense is 60 or higher after the double Rollos, range DPS needs to back up. Both melee DPS and range DPS need to be flicking their ZCB every 2 scythes and stay on the correct tick, which is set by the meleeer. Melee DPS did a 6-tick Elder Maul at the start. That means range DPS needs to delay a tick if they don't BGS backup. You'll know you're on the correct tick if your scythe is 2 ticks after Maiden's attack. Before 70s, both DPSers should spellbook swap and cast Death Charge, allowing melee DPS to ZCB for the skip and range DPS a potential claw. Mage catches 4 sets of crabs or 3 sets with a Sang if they are 1 tick late. Prioritize south and fill missing spawns with your T-bow. Use your scepter here. DPSers need to shotgun crabs that can't be frozen. Identify this based on if your mage was tick perfect and how many south crabs spawn. For example, if there are 2 south spawns, you need to hit all north spawns. If there is 1 south spawn, you need to hit 1 north spawn. This will become intuitive very quickly. After shotgunning the crabs, get back on the boss. Range DPS will ZCB if they did not back up. Push for 50s and follow the previously mentioned procedure. You then need to hunt down any solo crabs that have over 30 HP or so. Make sure you get Death Charge. Let's rewind to Mage. After freezing 4s, get back on Maiden until you think crabs will proc. Your last T-bow is usually under 56%. Once again, catch 4 sets of crabs, this time filling missing spawns with freezing the clump. Use your Kodai here. Barrage the clump until low HP and get back on Maiden. When 30s come out, go back to the scepter and freeze per usual. Switch rings and play for the skip. A final note for the major, your DPSers will spam Venge and heal other on you. Only pray Mage if you need. Don't step off of Maiden as your team is likely low HP. At this point, range DPS should communicate if they have claws. If there's only 1 north spawn, melee DPS should ignore it. Spec the boss if Mage is able to catch all. Otherwise, both DPS should treat 30s like the others. Melee DPS will regain ZCB by now and should spec to ensure the skip. Finally, both DPSers should be feeding the mage HP and venges. Bloat is a relatively simple boss in money raids. You're aiming for a 2 down here. The first player to enter the room should be the first player to pass the barrier. You can drive by BGS in money raids if you'd like, but it's not necessary. Spawn thralls if you have them and get 3 pre-fires. Click on the 3rd tick of his walk. Chally Forsyth Chally is the standard attack order here. It allows you to be a few ticks late to bloat and results in 2 downs 95% of the time. Bringing a P-neck is incredibly useful for tanking flies. Equip it after your second Chally. In general, hover around the corners and run away once bloat turns. On the second down, claw spec and scythe until dead. If you still have Chally for some reason, spec around 15%. At the chest, each player should buy a few sharks as well as a prayer pot if you didn't bring one in. With the recent stamina changes, melee DPS can buy a stam, sip it, and drop it. Nylo's is arguably the most complex room. The learning curve is very steep. You're aiming for a sub 3 minute boss spawn and a sub 4 minute room time. Let's quickly cover a few essential plugins. First, under top QOL. I recommend hiding all objects, recolor menu, recolor Big's menu darker, and instance timer. Secondly, download Nylo's death indicators. Third, under better NPC highlights, copy and paste my tile IDs. This will keep a box around dead Bigs, showing you where splits will spawn. Lastly, download Nyloer. On the sidebar you can choose your role, which will let you left click clumps and attack the style chosen. Below you can see stalls. This will be crucial for feedback. Finally, you can see how long the boss took and what your waves were. Next, go into the Nyloer settings and make darker wave 28. In addition, set make darker hotkey spacebar. In order to get sub 3 minute waves, you and your team need to memorize a guide and consistently practice. There's no way around this. The guide is the foundation of learning Nylos. With that being said, if you're like, that's way too serious for me, give me the big ideas, then let's keep going. You first need to understand some basic terminology. Precap. This includes waves 1 through 19 and has a room limit of 12. Transition. Switching from precap to postcap. Postcap. This includes waves 20 to 31 and has a room limit of 24. Cleanup. This is after wave 31 has spawned. Stalls. There are both natural and forced stalls. A natural stall is built into the room and is unavoidable. A forced stall is caused by a team when the room limit has been exceeded. Stalls are 4 ticks long and certain waves have multiple stalls. Wave 9, for example, has 3 stalls before wave 10. Decay. Spawns will naturally die on their own if left long enough. This will be used to our advantage. Pre-fires. Shooting spawns while still in the lane. During the precap, it's important to kill Bigs at the proper time. During waves 1 through 11, kill Bigs as soon as possible. This means pre-firing. Mage should hit the south 4, the west 8, the west 9, and the east 10. Melee DPS should hit the south 4, the west 5, and the west 11. Ranged DPS should hit the west 5, the south 7, and the west 8. If you're backing up, meaning hitting your non-designated role, attack once and get back to killing smalls. If the Nylo is your color, you need to stay on it until they die. After wave 12 spawns, leave the aggro Bigs alive until you kill wave 14 spawns. Let the wave 12 melee and the wave 15 mage decay on their own. Wave 17, 18, and 19 will each have 3 Bigs. For a good transition, we want to kill every 18 and every 19. However, wave 19 is the most important wave to not stall on. If you do, it can cascade to lots of Bigs decaying and flooding the room, leading to a chain of stalls. So, to ensure we don't stall, the ranger will kill the 18s once they enter the room. The major will attack the 19 on the first tick, 1 tile away from the barrier, and the meleeer will kill smalls. If the room is clean, they should hit the west 19 Big. Doing this will cause all the splits to appear after the wave 20 check, where 24 is the new limit. Entering the post cap, all Bigs need to be killed as soon as possible up until the last wave. The Major and Ranger need to learn their pre-fires for this to be successful. Melee DPS will act as a backup, scything crabs that get into the room. It cannot be understated that the final Bigs are popped immediately, as they will spawn the highest wave crabs that will not decay. During cleanup, focus on the newer spawns. If you follow the Nylo plugin setup, you'll notice 28s and below are dimmed. This helps you focus on 29s and above. Let's talk about some general rules and tips. The Major should look for high value barrages, especially during the post cap. Barraging smalls under Bigs will help prevent early stalls as well as take care of your primary goal, popping Bigs. Melee DPS needs to link Nylos to reduce lost ticks. This often comes down to memorization of the waves, but also zooming out and connecting dots. If you are using the maracas, you can still scythe the 21s and 22s with the hit in between. Use this tile. The Major should BGS. If they hit under 35, spec again. If not, claw. Both melee DPS and ranged DPS should Chally Scythe and ZCB when it turns green. In order to do this, Death Charge on wave 15 after Claw or Blowpipe specking. This will leave you with 95% when the boss spawns. This strategy requires a 307 boss spawn. If you regain to 100% spec, ZZB and Chaldy at the end if you get it back. Other than that, get 2 hits each phase and pre-switch to your highest DPS gear. Don't forget to tank Venges if you're high HP. Similar to Bloat, Sotetseg is a relatively simple room in money raids, but there's a few ways to make it faster. Spec in 3-man teams is as follows. Mage 1 Maul 1-3, Melee 1-2, and Range 2-3. Don't back up in 3s. If you're maging and brought the Shadow Scepter, bring runes for Shadow Barrage and replace your TOB entry with it. If you hit, save your Maul as backup. Under the Sotetseg section of top QOL, turn on the instance timer for the maze and select Hide White Screen. Maze running should be close to flawless and you should have an understanding of ideal movement. If you're still shaky, practice with the Sotetseg maze trainer below. Depending on where the maze starts, a maze should be run without waiting ticks. Preemptively run right. Any maze that starts in the middle or to the right should be started immediately. If the maze spawns to the left, wait 1 tick if close or 2 to 3 if far. I wouldn't assume this in a random team, but if you send with the same people consistently, standardize this. If at the end of the maze there is a long path, implement off on 3. The maze runner will skip the final portion, signaling to the team to do this. If somebody's behind, wait for them. Between phases, eat sharks so you can tank more Venges. In addition, equip your Maul. Ideally, you are speccing the first tick possible. Don't forget that you can eat a shark before this as you are not technically in combat. Utilize Heal Other. Transfer HP to Venge teammates that are below 50 HP. Can also heal Other before ticking the ball. Make sure you aren't overdoing this. You shouldn't be losing ticks or dying. Finally, I want to touch on tanking Venges throughout the fight. Sometimes you'll get an unlucky combo and just die. But generally, be patient and don't rush getting your Venge off. This is a money raid guide. Staying alive is the biggest DPS increase. Before entering Xarpus, buy 3 brews and 2 restores. If you have extra space, buy another brew or sharks. Xarpus is more complex than people give credit to. Luckily, 3s is easier than most. Enter on 0 and stay in a triangular shape. If you are on an exhume and another one appears near you, delay 1 tick before moving, especially if it spawns 1 or 2 tiles away. This will result in no heals. The general strategy I use is hover your mouse over your character and do a quick, inaccurate flick towards any exhume that spawns. In my opinion, this portion of Xarpus and freezing at Maiden are the biggest places where ping really matters. For defense reduction, each player mauls into BGS. If every maul lands, then one player can hold off on their BGS. Usually range DPS, but doesn't really matter. If multiple mauls miss, then re-maul. This will put you into the second scythe cycle. What a tongue twister. Make sure you are 5-ticking or learning it. If I had to teach you in 30 seconds, I would say figure out where you are in the cycle. There's 4, 3 scythe hits and 1 missed hit. When you're on the missed scythe hit, as soon as your player stops moving, click next to the rag tile, click Xarpus, click the outer rim. By the time you reach the outer rim, you'll likely wait a tick or 2 before starting back on the first cycle. The next mechanic you need to learn is 2-2-1-2-1. It is the highest DPS method post-Screech, surpassing 2-1-2-1. The numbers indicate scythe hits, separated by Xarpus turning. It requires you to pre-move to where Xarpus is looking, and once again, figure out where you are in the cycle. In my opinion, the best way to learn this is to identify one entry and work from there. So move to where Xarpus is looking, wait for him to turn, and attack immediately. This will put you at the last 2 of the cycle. You should also learn how to enter 2-2-1-2-1 as Xarpus screeches. This is based on which of the 4 scythe cycles you're on. Here Xarpus screeches on my 3rd cycle, putting me on the second 2. You'll start to recognize patterns and pick it up quickly. I'll also link a Discord that gets into the details, but I wouldn't be surprised if you learn this intuitively. Moving on to Verzik. If you brought the Lightbearer, make sure you equip it for P1, and non-majors should spawn melee thralls and spellbook swap again so they can death charge immediately after P1. Pray Piety and protect from mage throughout the first phase. We will be doing 1-1-2. I will link a video of each role's perspective, but we'll briefly cover it as melee DPS. The central idea of 1-1-2 is to pass the staff in a snake-like pattern. Player 1 is represented by the mage or the first orb. The hardest part of learning 1-1-2 is finding a team that is willing to practice it. You can watch videos and read charts, but it comes down to trying it, failing, and applying feedback. You need to have the timing of Verzik mastered before learning 1-1-2. If you know how to sank pre-fire into 2 scythes, you're good to go. At the start of P2, heal up and repot. Mages re-equip your Ultra Ring, melee DPS and range DPS, death charge, and spawn a new thrall. The first thing you need to learn for P2 is BOAK. There's a west and an east BOAK. Learn west first. It's easier and will set you up nicely to learn east. Start by learning the base version of BOAK. Tiles will be in the description. Use the step back method as seen until crabs spawn. Step back as you normally would, but on tile 1. Click Verzik, wait 1 tick, click tile 2, 3, and then 4. This is going to take care of most spawns. However, there are ways to optimize this for certain spawns as well as saving ticks. Learn this first, then start experimenting, or check out the description below to get into the weeds of it. Leave the purple crab if you're maging so your team can get death charge. You'll often see 2 crab spawns, so once Verzik sends a lightning attack at 40 to 50%, start the BOAK movement again. If you need to respawn your thrall or cast another death charge before reds, drop a potion 2 tiles away, and on your missed scythe hit, click with walk on and spellbook swap immediately. This will ensure no damage is taken and no hits lost. Throughout Verzik, healing should be done by brew super combats instead of 3 brew sips, restore, and then super combating. With minimal mistakes, this should be enough to get through a Verzik. If you take some damage, you can get 2 brew doses, a restore, and a super combat sip in between reds without losing DPS. Speaking of reds, scythe twice, get back on Verzik, and instead of losing a tick on the missed cycle, hit the crab once more if it has decent HP left. There are multiple ways to tick fix, but let's just learn the most common and useful one. If you hit big and only need to scythe the red crab twice, check what cycle you're on when attacking Verzik. If you swing twice before your missed cycle, that means you have 4 extra ticks. This is not enough for a scythe, so preferably you claw spec, but if you don't have it, you should still claw scratch. Otherwise, you just lose 4 ticks. After the first set of crabs, if Verzik is close to or under 20% HP, skip the second scythe on the crabs and instead attack Verzik on the first tick possible. If you have spec, max DPS will be a claw spec, a claw scratch, and 5 scythes. If you don't have spec, do 6 scythes. As P2 finishes up, try to have everybody venged for P3. I'm going to assume you know how to properly tank. If you don't, keep practicing and make sure you don't drag her away from her starting location. The first thing you need to learn is P3 BOAK. Luckily, you're practicing West BOAK and it's very similar. Stand north of tile 1. Click on tile 3 the second tick the crabs move. Swing, run diagonal of tile 1, run west. There's a spawn north of you and it will feel like you need to run earlier than you should. Don't. Wait the 1 tick and then move. Once you're able to tank Verzik near perfect without having her move, you are ready to learn the Ducktank. This is slightly more tricky, but if you need to, learn it in steps and record yourself to see where you're messing up. Stand 2 tiles north of tile 2. Click on tile 2 the second tick the crabs move, then the unlabeled tile, then on Verzik. Once you see an XP drop, click tile 3, then 4, then 5. Click Verzik as soon as your true tile reaches tile 5. These are really important to learn, and while they seem tricky, they become muscle memory after a few successful attempts. Next up, let's learn the 2 most common Pogtank setups. If you proc tornadoes before the final scythe hit on the north, use this setup. After your final scythe, run to Verzik's east side. Scythe, run south, and step on this tile 1 tick before your scythe is off cooldown. If you proc tornadoes on the final scythe hit, use this setup. Run east, wait 1 tick, step under, and scythe. Another way to look at this is to 6 tick your scythe. If you're struggling with the movement of the Pogtank, practice in the simulator. Stand at one of her corners and practice stepping under her one tick before her attack, followed by clicking her. Once you're able to do that, incorporate the running portion. If you can't figure something out, break it down into smaller pieces. You should never see the green ball, but if you see yellows, eat them. Like I said earlier, at the current prices, employing and mastering these strategies should result in roughly 16 mil per hour and around 16-minute raids. There is a decent amount of RNG in trios, but raids over 17 minutes are often a lack of skill or significant deaths. That does it for this video. Make sure you like and subscribe if you made it this far, and I'll see you next time.